Once again, welcome to this webinar sponsored by the Democracy Fund. I'd like to thank the Democracy Fund for sponsoring both this webinar today and also for sponsoring and supporting the Common Data Format work. If you're not familiar with the Democracy Fund, it's a bipartisan foundation that supports voter-centric elections, and it's selected this project as one of many that it sees important to the election space, and also to provide support for any jurisdictions who may need support in implementing the CDFs. So it supports my work. Sorry, I should have said I'm Katie Owens-Hubler, and I'm a consultant for the Democracy Fund working on this project. And I'll introduce another consultant that we have in just a minute as well. But we are able to provide support with implementing these CDFs, and we'd like to just give you an overview today of what we have available and how it might be applicable in your jurisdiction. Just a few housekeeping things for you. I do have all participants on mute. If you would like to ask a question, there is a chat box that you can do that, and you can do that anytime throughout this conversation. But we'll try to answer those all at the end and give us enough time to do some Q&A. But we are also available if there's any questions that you have that come up at a later date, and I'll give you all of the presenters' contact information as well. We are recording this webinar and it will be available for the future. So should you have a colleague that wasn't able to make it today, we will make that available. Okay. So I'll just go over a quick outline of what we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about the history and the development of the common data formats, and that will be John Wack from NIST. I'll introduce him in a moment. And then next, it will be John Gerlai, who's a consultant for the Democracy Fund, and he's going to talk about some of the uses for the common data formats in elections, and also give you a tour of different resources that we have available. And then again, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So just real quickly, what is a common data format? You may have heard this term, you may not have heard this term. In your everyday life, you've probably actually run into it at one point or another. It's a standardized format for exchanging information between devices and systems. So the end goal of developing these common data formats is to allow systems manufactured by different vendors to be interoperable so that they can talk to each other more easily, exchange information more easily. And we'll go into a lot more depth about how they do that. You're probably familiar with common data formats in other aspects of your life. Some examples that we run into every day: Wi-Fi is a standard that's pretty, you can buy any device and it will probably work with your Wi-Fi. USBs are another example where you're allowing different devices to connect and to interoperate. We don't currently have that in elections. We kind of expect systems, even from different vendors, to just work, to just be able to talk to each other efficiently. They don't do that yet. And that's the point of this project and sort of implementing these common data formats, is to simplify that. Make your lives easier is hopefully the goal. So I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. John Gerlai is an elections consultant whose involvement in the election space spans over a decade. He's worked on the ground at both the county and state election office, where he was responsible for the maintenance of the statewide voter registration database. He's worked on data-driven projects, including database design, development, and migration. He's co-author of 4 of the NIST 1500 series common data formats, and you'll learn more about those today. He also chairs the NIST EAC working group on election modeling, working to build a common understanding of elections across the country. And John Wack is a computer scientist and researcher at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. He's authored a variety of IT security guidance documents, notably in the area of voting security, smart cards, and network security. His most recent work is in developing the next version of the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, or the VVSG, and developing common data format standards for election data. His voting-related goals at NIST include producing new common data format standards that result in greater transparency and interoperability for electronic voting systems, and in producing requirements for voting systems that are secure, usable, and accessible. So I'm going to turn it over to John Wack.
Okay, let me make sure I'm ready to go here. I'm having a little bit of difficulty finding my, okay, here we go. Okay, so thank you again, Katie, and thank you all for being part of this webinar. So my role here is just to give you a brief overview of the Common Data Format project, what it is, and a little bit about history and what it consists of. And hopefully this will give you a little bit more background for when John's talk occurs. So why develop a CDF? So Katie answered that to some extent. And also one of the most important things I thought was to simply help election officials to make systems and data easier to use. So besides interoperability, besides reducing costs and integration, it was essentially to make life more simple for election officials. So the history is that, as far as I know, it started around 2002 in an IEEE working group, and unfortunately the parent committee ran into some political issues and went into limbo. But in the meantime, other organizations were working on common data formats. So Pew and now Democracy Works was working on the Voting Information Project, which was an XML-based common data format for what's on the ballot, where do I go to vote, sorts of information that proved very successful. And then notably, I ran across Florida work where every county in Florida does things a bit differently, and the state produced a common format for election results and got together with the vendors, and this could be used across all counties and was very successful and very influential. So we decided at NIST this was a good thing, and we had been working with the Election Assistance Commission, who agreed with us, and in 2009 we restarted work on this. We initially restarted the IEEE committee, and we found it more convenient to really use just a public working group based at NIST. So we've had a lot of luck and good success. We've had a lot of good organizations, as you can see up there, in a lot of states, many fine people. And I would also like to thank Democracy Fund here. Democracy Fund's involvement has been vital to actually taking this work beyond specifications and actually implementing it. So the development strategy, I'll actually move to this next diagram and talk about the development strategy. It's really starting with the low-hanging fruit. So starting with the data that flows out of the voting system as a whole, and not out of specific devices, but flows out as a whole or flows in. So election results flow out, election definition information flows in. So that's basically the voting system interacting with external clients and customers. The voter registration database, election results producing websites. And then from there, going inside the voting system and attempting to have devices within the voting system use a common data format, which moves things towards greater interoperability. So one example I've got there is cast vote records. So the status in a nutshell is we've got 5 specifications. They're NIST special publications, which aren't standards per se, but are used as standards. And we've got 4 common data format standards that are complete. And then we've got an election terminology glossary that ties everything together and will be used in the next VVSG, and I hope will be used in broader areas as well. And it's listed as in progress. It's actually very complete at this point, but we are releasing it around the same time we're releasing the next version of the VVSG. So very briefly, the first one we developed was the election results reporting specification, and it's really a misnomer because there's an awful lot of pre-election information about that specification. So it really works for pre-election imports from voter registration databases or candidate filing systems, and also works as well for results. It was first used in Ohio in 2016, and Google has been using it within the country and even internationally. The schema associated with it is now more or less the same as what's used in VIP, and a number of other states are working on it now. So we've had some pretty good success thus far with that. The election event logging is just a simple format that every device can use to export its election event log into a common format, which will make things easier to audit and analyze. The cast vote records one is a very interesting one. That's might be the most recent one we've finally put to bed. And that's specifically for cast vote records that can be exported from the devices that create them, such as scanners or ballot marking devices hooked up to a scanner, DREs. And the great thing about it is that it significantly improves the auditing capabilities of the system if used. It can be used for ballot comparison audits and track all the different changes that may occur to a cast vote record as it's scanned and as there's adjudication. And then the last one is the voter records interchange. That's essentially voter registration exchanges that may occur between an MVA and a voter registration database. It can be used for initial registrations, for updates, maintenance, could be extended to deal with electronic poll books, and being used in some states, and we hope to continue with that. So in your spare time, you can go to either of these two websites. If you want introductory material and overviews, I recommend going to vote.nist.gov, and you can find information about the other aspects of the NIST voting work. And then for specific development files, schemas, as well as the specifications, this is a GitHub repository that points to the individual projects. So I hope that's been useful, and with that, I'd like to turn it over to John Gerlai.
Thanks, John. I just want to mention that anybody can ask questions at any time, and we're going to leave some time available at the end of this webinar to go over questions and answers. So let me show my screen. Okay. So like Katie said, my name is John Gerlai. I spent a number of years at the county and state level where I oversaw more of the technical side of voting systems and got involved in 2012 in the common data format work, helping Ohio implement some of the common data formats. And this talk today, we're going to go over the use cases of the common data formats, specific scenarios where the common data formats can be used. And we'll go over some additional resources at the end to hopefully jumpstart common data format development in your office. So every development effort needs to have some sort of methodology, and the methodology we chose is one called use case driven development. And what that means is we're looking at narrowly defined uses of the formats that survey immediate and current need, and especially use cases that intersect with pain points that election officials have, such as election results reporting, such as doing efficient and effective risk limiting audits, etc. So like I said, I'm going to go through each common data format in turn. There's 4 of them. I'm going to go over election results reporting, cast vote records, then voter records interchange, and finally election event logging. So almost every office has to deal with election results reporting, and it's one of the most stressful tasks that election officials do. Part of the difficulty is all these third-party organizations, including citizens and the media, want timely access to the data in the format that is usable for them. What happens is you end up creating a proliferation of reports on election night, each serving a different audience. A common data format for election results reporting will hopefully simplify the election reporting lifecycle by providing a single format that's both powerful enough and flexible enough to support your needs. So the first use case is pre-election. So loading our systems with candidate information, contest information, election dates, all of that. What ends up happening is because the election management system is isolated from all the other systems being a certified piece of equipment, is you do a lot of the election configuration separately on another system, think like a candidate filing system. And then you have to do data entry twice. Well, that's not very efficient. A use case of the election results reporting format is to provide an import-export mechanism so jurisdictions don't have to do duplicative manual entry, as well as provide that information to other systems that need it, such as a state EMS, for example, when a state wants to provide election results reporting at the state level. Another use case is providing pre-election data to the media, to civic entities like the Voter Information Project, which feeds Google. And one nice thing is starting with VIP 5.0, the format is actually based on the election results reporting format. So it's very easy to go from supporting VIP to doing election results reporting. So if anybody's seen a presentation from me before, I love diagrams, and I've cut down the number of diagrams significantly, but there's still going to be a few. And so the next several slides are going to have what are called component diagrams. So each of these yellow boxes represents a component, and what they call the lollipop is an interface that is exposed by that component. So if it's filled in, that is an interface that a component is providing, and if it's this half circle, that means that this device needs that interface. So hopefully an example will make this a little bit more clear. So like I said before, nobody likes to do duplicative hand entry. It's time consuming, it's error prone, but in many of our systems, that's the only way to do it. In this example, taken from Wisconsin, the counties have to enter information because the counties do printing and programming of their local election management systems. Likewise, municipal governments are responsible for entering the same information into the statewide EMS for production of sample ballots and other information that the state provides. Obviously, duplicating and hand entering information from two sources is going to lead to some inconsistencies. Do we have to accept this as a fact of life? No, we don't. Through a common data format, we can do data entry once and then feed other systems as needed. So in this example, the counties and municipalities are hand entering into a single system, the statewide EMS, and then feeding that information to the county system. And this diagram could be flipped, and the county system could be feeding a statewide system. It's really up to you. Obviously, with a name like election results reporting, the primary use case is election night reporting. And, election results reporting on election night usually means summary reports, but it could also mean precinct reports, precinct split level reports, what people commonly refer to as canvas reports. And that's kind of the bread and butter of the election results reporting common data format. Not only can it report at different levels of specificity, but the reporting scope can be a precinct, it can be a polling location, all the way up to a state or federal level. So in this example, suppose a state wants to offer election results reporting. Well, if they use a NIST election results reporting common data format and the county systems are ready to provide that, it becomes a seamless operation where the counties produce reports that the state then receives and aggregates. They can produce election results on their website. They can also produce election results through the election results reporting format again at that aggregated level to feed the media, as well as the Associated Press, who also feeds certain media outlets. And then the media can provide the same exact election results on election night. One benefit of using a common data format in this scenario is that the media outlets are never transcribing things, so you never run into scenarios where the media may have reported the wrong thing. Because they can ingest those formats directly, it's going to reduce some of the issues that we encounter on election night. Post-election is really just about providing those final official results. The media loves those reports, especially if you have a close race, you have a recount, but also researchers are interested in that information, and it's useful to provide that in a common data format. The next common data format is cast vote records, and cast vote records are becoming more and more in the forefront as we start talking about risk limiting audits, and we'll get into their use there in a little bit. Cast vote records are sometimes referred to as ballot images. Common use cases for cast vote records include tabulation, adjudication, and auditing. This is the first use case for the cast vote records format, vote capture, device export. So this is information coming from a DRE, coming from an OpScan at the precinct, an OpScan at the Central Election Office, a batch fed scanner, etc. And you can see that common data format enabled scanner can allow us to interoperate with different devices from different vendors. So you could have a scanner from one vendor and a tabulator from another vendor, for example, or a scanner from one vendor and an EMS from another vendor. Probably the most important or most pressing need right now is auditing systems to be able to ingest cast vote records to do risk limiting audits. So in this example, we have the red vendor and we have the yellow vendor, and each vendor has their own proprietary format, and you see that these two don't talk to each other, but they can through the use of CVR. So that just illustrates that point. So the next use case is aggregated exports. This is when you have a system that is aggregating CVRs. Think your EMS when you're loading it with memory cards from election night. You're aggregating the results. And the EMS can take an aggregated set of CVRs and export those into another system. The use cases there primarily right now is to feed an auditing system, as well as ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting isn't natively supported by a lot of voting systems right now, so there's interest in providing a bespoke ranked choice voting tabulator that could take a set of cast vote records and arrive at the winners using the cast or ranked choice voting method. Another use case is adjudication. If you want to do digital adjudication, the cast vote record format supports scanned ballot images of the ballot, so you can see the ballot right on the screen alongside with the decisions that the voting equipment made, and you can override those for voter intent. So obviously the format is very flexible, but in addition to having this flexibility and use cases, it also supports N/M voting, what people normally refer to as plurality voting or just voting, ranked choice voting, which is becoming, like I said, more and more popular, as well as some other voting methods such as cumulative and range. So there is a number of data points that are required to do ranked choice voting. This collects information about the ranks, the effective rank, and the rounds, and you can actually store the effective cast vote records at each round and kind of see how things ended up per round. Vendors are committed to supporting this format. There is a product coming out from the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center to produce a bespoke tabulator for ranked choice voting. So one of the key advantages of using the NIST cast vote record format is it's been vetted by experts in the field of election auditing. And as you might expect, as a result of that, the format is really good at doing risk limiting audits. Specifically, the NIST CVR supports associating audit identifiers such as imprinted numbers onto a ballot such that the ballot can be correlated with the cast vote record, which is very important. The next common data format I'm going to go over is voter records interchange. And this is a little different in that we're talking about transactions that normally occur outside a certified voting system. Think online voter registration. In fact, this format was originally designed when I was in Ohio to support Ohio's online voter registration effort. We eventually branched out the format to support other use cases such as automatic voter registration, connected online voter registration, and VRI transactions, and a number of other use cases. So the basic use case for voter records interchange is, like I said, online voter registration. This could be online voter registration hosted by the state, or it could be hosted by a third party such as Rocker Votes. Also, since it supports FPCA, it can be used for UOCAVA portals to have people request absentee ballots while they're overseas, or just general absentee requests. Format has great support for both the NVRA and FPCA. We really focused on those two forms because they are supported at the federal level. The NVRA is under the EAC and FPCA is overseen by FVAP. We know that states have their own requirements for voter registration. We support those as well. Some of the examples would be declared party affiliation, when the voter chooses the party they wish to be affiliated with when they register to vote, as well as specific assertions that voters are required to make of themselves before they register to vote. It also supports extensions where if you want to ask additional questions as part of the voter registration process, you can do that. In Ohio's case, we added a question whether or not somebody wanted to be a precinct election official on election day. This use case just says that we're supporting updates as well as new registrations. And in Ohio, one of the things we did is we supported NVRA list maintenance there. So if people wanted to confirm their existing address, that was supported through the use of the VRI format. You could also do things like ballot requests, as I said earlier. Another thing that online voter registration systems often do is they pre-qualify the voter. They ask the voter to enter their information so that you can check and make sure that they're eligible before they go through, the 10, 15 steps required to register to vote. It's a time saver for them, and also, will lead to a nicer experience for the voter. Should also mention that the Lookup case also supports things such as voter portals. So if you wanted to offer the voters in your state or jurisdiction, am I registered type lookups, you could do that. Polling place lookups, basically any data about the voter registration record. This is a big paragraph, so let me simplify it for you. VRI supports NVRA. VRI supports automatic voter registration. So the format was designed with interacting with third-party and second-party organizations in mind. So that means it can store information about the DMV's side of the house transaction, where it came from, how it got fed through the system, what office it came from, et cetera. So that provides very good traceability when things go sideways to be able to check with the DMV and say, we've got record DMV 1234, and they can look that up and say, okay, this is what happened. So the system is designed with NVRA transactions in mind. Or I should say the common data format is. Another benefit of the VRI format is it's designed for modern software development methodologies such as cloud and microservices. And that just means that you're going to spend less time working on the specifics of the format that you're using between systems and focus on the value add. So this example shows how a third party and a online voter registration front end, probably from the state, can both use the same back-end system. Since they both speak VRI, it doesn't matter if the voter registration transaction occurs from the state system or a third party, or maybe Jobs and Family Services, a social service agency. They're all speaking to the same endpoint, and that means that there's a lot less software maintenance involved. Finally, we're going to go over election event logging. This is a small format that focuses in on the voting system equipment and some of the events that get emitted during election night or election day. Think open polls, closed polls, ballot jams, etc. You know, when things go sideways, you don't want to spend a lot of time learning about the event logging system that your equipment uses. You just want to be able to quickly identify the problem and fix it. So this format provides a standard format that all vendors can use to correlate events during election day or the election period and do analysis. If you've looked at the Center for Information Security or Internet Security's election handbook, this is a best practice. You want to do logging, you want to be able to consolidate your logs, and this format supports all that. So the simplest form of logging is to have a single device that emits a number of events, and that is one log file. That's commonly what you think of when you have logs. You have a log for device A, device B, device C, and they're all separate logs. But what's becoming more and more popular is the security information event management systems, where the logs get consolidated to a single point, the SIEM system, and you can do analysis on those log files. This makes it a lot easier to see what happened on election night, election day, and you know, do postmortems on your election processes. The third use case is kind of cool, actually. Sometimes you have device failures. Well, that's not cool. But what is cool is that you can take the same memory card out of device A and put it in device B, and the event logging format can pick up right where it left off and say, okay, I'm now device B, and you know, keep track of which device it was attached to. So the first 4 events get logged, well, actually 5 events get logged as the original device, and then the rest get logged as that new device that it got plugged into. I want to give a brief overview of the marketplace for common data formats. Right now, the most popular common data format is actually the voter information project. That isn't a NIST common data format, but it's certainly a common data format that touches elections in a very real way. And something that Democracy Works has been looking at is how VIP and election results reporting are related, and how to make it easier for jurisdictions to provide data feeds. So I would say talk to them about their tooling if you're interested in it. Google also has good validator tools if you're looking to do election results reporting. they have good tools to get in a format that they like for consumption. Then when it comes to cast vote records, there is a open source risk limiting audit tool on the horizon from VotingWorks, and that's going to be great. The last thing here is the Rank Choice Voting Tabulator is another open source tool that's, as far as I know, going through certification and will be available quite soon. So that's also very exciting. So with that, I'm going to go over some resources that are available on the internet to kind of keep this conversation going. So let's see. Okay. All right, so you should see GitHub, and this is the US NIST government's voting repository, and this has all the common data formats inside it. So if you go to the above URL, you'll be able to bring up all the common data formats. And if you scroll down here, you'll see that there are links to the individual CDFs. So we have cast vote records, event logging, and so forth. If you click on one of these, it will bring up a specific repository containing information about that common data format. And if we scroll down here, give you a brief overview of the common data format files that are available in this repository. So, you know, documentation, obviously very important, the specification in Word format and PDF, some example files, and then some files for the techies. I'd say the most important file on each and every one of these repositories is the specification itself. So if we go up here and click on that, you'll see that this is a PDF that you can download. Probably don't want to read it on the GitHub website, but this is the actual NIST publication that vendors will have to test against. It contains all the details about the format. I should also say that there's very nice front matter to each and every one of these common data formats that goes into the background, contains executive summaries. I'm just going to scroll through real quick here. Contains an executive summary, why somebody should care about using a common data format, some of the use cases we were talking about. So yeah, why is the specification needed, the intended audience, overview of the use cases, and then some of the technical nitty-gritty here. Like I said, all the common data format repositories use the same structure. So if we go to election results reporting, you know, it's going to look mostly the same. You're going to have, well, actually, you need to go to version 2 because we have 2 versions of election results reporting. The first version came out in 2015. So version 2 is the one that we just finished this year. And you can also go to and look at the specification and read more at your leisure. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Katie.
Okay, thanks, John. We have gotten one question, but I want to reiterate that you can ask questions either in the chat box or there's a dedicated place for questions. So at this point, we would like to take your questions and engage you in any way that we can. I think I forgot to mention at the beginning that we also have a handout available in the drop-down menu. You can download that, and that has links to a lot of the things that John just went over. And you can also reach out to us anytime. I'll actually give you our contact information as well. So the question that we got was about geopolitical units and if there's a database out there that has that information in the context of election results reporting and kind of rolling up that data. John Gerlai, could you maybe address that a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, we have OCDIDs, which I know is the Sunlight. It's a Center for Democracy or Center for Technology and Civic Life is maintaining that going forward. And those are identifiers that can correlate geography to identifiers. I'm not sure that answers the question, but I hope that helps.
May I jump in? This is John Wack here. At this 2009 workshop we held about the need for common data formats, one of the things that came out loud and clear was the need for common identifiers. So, for example, congressional districts that overlap counties in some states, each county identified that contest differently. And if everybody used the same identifiers to identify those sorts of things, it would be a lot easier to deal with election results and other data. We have included in the common data formats attributes for maintaining those sorts of identifiers. And also there's requirements, draft requirements in the next VBSG for those sorts of identifiers as well.
Are there any other questions? Anything else anybody else would like us to address while you've got us on the line? Well, I'm not seeing any. So I've got a slide on right now with all of our information. Things that we can do for you, and I do want to say that thanks to the Democracy Fund, this is all at no cost to local jurisdictions. The Democracy Fund is supporting John July and myself to help implement these formats. And so if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can get on a call with you to talk a little bit more about these formats and how you might be able to use them. John is able to come out and provide technical assistance if you need that. At really any level that you might need. He can get into the nitty gritty of the database if you need him to. I volunteer John for things, that's what I do. And also let us know if there's a need for additional webinars. We do hope to hold some additional ones on more specifically different formats and get into more of the nitty gritty on those too. And then if there's anything else that you need from us, just reach out and let us know. Again, we're here to support you, to support local jurisdictions and state level election offices in any way that we can. Okay, John is saying he sees some more questions. So let's see. John, do you want to take those?
I'll take a couple of these. Maybe you can tee up some others. Are the CDFs voluntary, or will they be mandatory through the Fair Voting Reporting Act? I'm not familiar with the Fair Voting Reporting Act. Is that a bill that's working its way through Congress?
I'm not familiar with that as well, but maybe you can talk a little bit. Actually, this might be more for, go ahead.
Actually, John Wack, why don't you talk about requirements vis-a-vis VBSG?
Sure. So right now, NIST is developing a set of requirements associated with a VBSG. And I think roughly in the September timeframe, there's going to be a meeting of this Technical Guidelines Development Committee where they will decide whether to accept those requirements or not. And then if they accept them, pass them on to the EAC for consideration in making that the next version of the VBSG. So currently, there are requirements that manufacturers be able to export and import in those formats. So a manufacturer can still use their own particular format at the same time, and if needed, they must be able to import or export in the common data format. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, John. So there's another one here. Are there any best practices or guidance around publishing or representing political geographies in the common data format?
That is a good question. And I would say that no, there aren't any, but looking at Google being the biggest user of the election reports standard, I would say that they have some guidance through their validator tool as to how they want geopolitical geographies represented, and I kind of look to them for guidance on that. I know there's many different ways to do it, and it's still kind of an evolving area, so stay tuned.
Great. And this one, John July, maybe you can talk about this a little bit more. Could you expand on which jurisdictions currently actively use or pilot CDFs or its precursors? And maybe you can talk a bit about your experience in Ohio.
So yeah, in Ohio, we adopted the election results reporting in common data format in 2015, and that is still used. I know the site isn't up right now, but if you go to vote.ohio.gov during an election period, probably on election night, certainly, you'll be able to download and export that's in the NIST CDF format. Additionally, the Ohio Online Voter Registration portal, olvr.sos.state.oh.us, that is based on the NIST VRI common data format. There are a number of states that are looking to adopt VRI, as well as Rock the Vote is looking to kind of standardized around that when they do connected OVR with states. VRI is also being looked at by DMV vendors, which apparently are a thing. There are vendors that provide turnkey DMV solutions, and they're looking to support the common data format. So that was kind of VRI heavy, but hopefully that gives you some ideas of where it's being used. Cast vote record format was used by one of the vendors, I won't say this year or last year, with some success. And the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center has built their product based on the Cast Vote Record CDF as well. And then I would say that the DARPA project is looking to use the NIST CDFs for all of its inputs and outputs. Obviously, those projects are still underway and subject to change.
I'll just add, John Wack here, that the AP has been able to ingest to take common data format files of election results, and then we mentioned Google as well.
Okay, were there any other questions before we wrap up here? Anything anybody else has? I think there's some questions that we could possibly answer offline as well. And again, if you'd like to get more involved, here's our contact information. And if you have any need for in-person technical assistance, anything that you'd want to run by us, that would be great.